Maggie, 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 Maggie. Krista, 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 Krista. Magsta, Magsta, the science gals.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and this is Krista, my science pal.
And today, we're going to tell you about running records and how to use them in your classroom.
Did you know that butterflies cannot fly unless their body temperature is above 86 degrees? Accurate word reading is probably the one you'll use most often, as long as the student is reading a just right book. This is notated with a check mark above the correctly read word. So if the student says, Velma read everything in the library about butterflies, we can check every single word. Check, 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 check. Go.
The next mark we're going to talk about is an omission. Omission happens when a student skips over a word that is in the text. Here's how it works. The actual sentence in the book reads, she discovered that there are 20,000 different kinds, which was a lot. Let's say the student skipped over the word there. So here's how the sentence would read. She discovered that are 20,000 different kinds, which was a lot.
Repetition of a word is notated with an R above the word that was repeated. If the student repeats the word more than once, you'll write the number next to the R. So let's say the sentence says, she adored the ones with colorful names, brown elfin, frosted flasher, sleepy orange. But the student reads, she adored the ones with colorful names, brown elfin, frosted flasher, sleepy orange. The sentence would look like this. Check, 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 because the student reads the word colorful, but then repeats the word colorful, so you'll put an R next to the check mark, but he only repeated it once, so you don't have to write a number. Check, 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 and check. Repetition of a phrase or sentence is notated by a line drawn completely around the phrase and an R at the bottom. And Maggie will demonstrate for us. And the student reads, and the ones with funny names, and the ones with funny names, comma, question mark, Americans now.
Our next error is a self-correct. When a student is reading along and they read a word incorrectly, they might realize that they're wrong. So they'll go back and reread the word correctly, and the self-correct is not actually considered an error. So let's see what this would look like on paper. Not to mention the ones with mention, the ones with strange names. Morpho, painted lady, gossamer wing. Here's how you would annotate the self-correction. So the student said not to mention. So we write the incorrect word at the top. But the student went back. Not to mention the ones with mention. The student self-corrected and said the word correctly. The ones with strange names. Morpho, painted lady, gossamer wing.
An insertion is made when a student puts a word into the text that was not there originally. So if the sentence reads, but her favorite butterfly of all was the orange and black monarch, but the student reads, but her favorite butterfly of all was the pretty orange and black monarch, the sentence would look like this. A check above every word that she read correctly, and a caret with the word pretty in it, and then a check mark above the rest of the words.
Next is substitution. Substitution happens when a student says a word that isn't in the text and replaces another word in the text. Here's how it works. When it got cold, all the butterflies would fly south to Mexico. Let's say the student omits to stay warm. So here's how it sounds all together. When it got cold, all the butterflies
butterflies which fly south to Mexico stay warm.
Alright, next let's try and practice on our own. I'll read the sentence like I were a student, and you go ahead and follow along on your paper, making all of the marks that we just talked about. Ready? Here we go. Velma thought this was an amazing confidence because last winter she and she's family had also flown south to Mexico. Here's how it should look. Velma, and the student skips the word thought originally. This, and she pauses and repeats the whole phrase. So we'll draw our line back to the front and put our little R so we know it was a repetition. Velma thought this was an amazing, and the student says confidence. Because last winter, she and the student says she's, so you draw a line with she's above it. Family had also flown south to Mexico. Now back to Maggie at the park.
Our first error is an error of meaning. A meaning error occurs when a student reads a word incorrectly and does not self-correct, and the meaning of the word that they read is not similar to the meaning of the word in the text. So here's an example. The dog ran up the hill is the sentence in the text. But the student read the dog sat up the hill. Sat and ran do not resemble each other in meaning. Therefore, the error is a meaning error. The next error is a syntax error. When a student reads a word incorrectly and does not self-correct, and the sentence that the student read no longer makes sense, then the error is syntactical. Here's an example. The girl fell down. That was the sentence in the text. The girl fall down is the sentence read by the student. Fall down is not a phrase that would be said in the English language. Therefore, the error is syntactical. Our third and final error is a visual error. Visual error occurs when a student reads a word incorrectly and does not self-correct, and the spelling of the words do not resemble each other. Here's an example. Stephen had lots of friends. That's the sentence in the text. Stephen had lots of buddies, is what the student read. Buddies and friends share similar meanings, and they both work syntactically, but they are not visually alike.
The first error we are going to look at takes place on the second sentence of our text. She discovered that are 20,000 different kinds, which was a lot, is what the student said. So when the student skips the word there, we can see that she may have still been using meaning because the text still mostly makes sense. However, we would not speak like that in the English language, therefore we know the reader is not using syntax. The reader is also not using visual cues because she skipped a word. We will mark this in the error column marked MSB for meaning, syntax, and visual, stating that the student did not use syntactical or visual cues. This may be something we try to work on with the student at a later date. Because repetitions do not count as errors, we do not have to analyze this repetition for meaning, syntax, or visual cues. This is the case for repetition of a phrase as well, though we might look at why the student is repeating words and phrases if this continues to occur. The next sentence reads, not to mention the ones with strange names, Morpho, Painted Lady, Gossamer Wing. The student first says Menton and then self-corrects. We can notate this in the column marked SC for self-correct. In this sentence, the student inserted the word pretty. We can see that the student was using meaning because saying it was an orange and black or a pretty orange and black monarch does not change the overall meaning of the text. We would also say a sentence like this, so we know that the student was using syntactical cues. However, because the text did not read the word pretty, our student was lacking the use of a visual cue. We can mark this in the MSV column for errors as well, with a V for visual. In the following sentence, the student substitutes the word monarch with the word butterfly. Both butterfly and monarch have similar meanings, so we know that the student was using meaning cues. It also makes sense within the sentence, so our student was using syntactical cues. However, butterfly and monarch look nothing alike in spelling, so our student was not using visual cues. This next sentence has a couple things going on. The first is the repetition of the phrase, Velma thought this was, in which the student had originally skipped the word thought. However, they corrected themselves, so we can mark this in the self-correct column. The student then says the word confusion instead of coincidence. We can tell the student was using visual cues because confusion and coincidence look similar. However, they have very different meanings, so we can tell that the student lacked meaning cues in this case. It also makes sense up to the point of error, so the student may still have been using syntax. Next, the student replaces the word her with the word she's. In this case, we will say the student was using meaning, even though we would not use the phrase she's family in that way. We know that the student was not using syntax. The student was also not using visual cues because she's and her do not look similar.
Did you know that many butterflies can taste with their feet, so they can know if the leaf that they're sitting on is good to lay their eggs?
Our third and final error is an error in visual meaning. Sorry, skeleton.
Yeah, it's my.
I'm almost done. Just, he can, okay, well,
It's getting more comfortable.
he's really chill. I don't need to record right now.